It's not crucial to the model in any respect, but it's the correction of that failure actually may lead to a more detailed and robust model than what you had in the first place. In fact, I would say any good model should have those kinds of refining falsifications occurring. After all, nobody knows everything, and you're bound to make mistakes in your interpretation. And so if there aren't any mistakes, that makes me suspicious that the people developing the model aren't being risky enough. And really, that's how you put forward a model. You want to make risky predictions. Because by making risky predictions, you have the greatest opportunity of putting forward a little more knowledge, more understanding, and taking your model to the next step. If all of your predictions are safe, which means there's no possibility that it could ever be falsified, then that's a model that has no potential of growing and becoming more robust as the future developments take place. But we're talking about falsifications that are in no way damaging to the model. They're simply falsifications that expose areas where you need to learn more and to develop a more detailed explanation. The model easily accommodates a correction.
Okay. Hugh, you have developed a scorecard of sorts in the 17th chapter. Let's talk about that, because I think that's...
and if I could just make one interjection. One example of where we've been making these refining corrections to our testable creation model would be the 5 editions we've put out since 1973 of our booklet, Genesis 1: A Scientific Perspective. And particularly when we talk about the moon, there's not much in Genesis 1 about the moon, and so we were trying to come up with a more detailed understanding of where that fits into that creation account. And you can see over the past 35 years the adjustments that have been made there. But none of those adjustments have been corrosive. They've actually extended the scope and the explanatory power of our model.
So you're saying that back when you wrote about the moon in 1973, less was known, so there have been refinements to the model, but
back in 73, we had no understanding of this Mars-sized planet that was in the same orbit as the Earth, caught up with the Earth, collided with the Earth, and led to the formation of the moon. Knowledge of all that was missing back in 73.
Okay.
So... with those kinds of discoveries, we've been able to come up with a much more detailed explanation of where the moon fits in and the role it plays in the Genesis creation account. So that's one example.
Okay. All right. Well, how did the major models fare in the 17th chapter? First of all, tell me the models and how you came about this scorecard and how each one
There's
fared.
actually a 5th model we consider, which is directed panspermia, the idea that, there's aliens out there on another planet that have been regularly visiting Earth and salting Earth with life forms. I didn't put that one into the scorecard because there's a fairly widespread consensus that model lacks credibility now that we understand just how much time, cosmic time, is necessary for there to be an intelligent species with any kind of technology. And it's such that it's impossible, given the laws of physics, for the universe to open a door for that kind of a species and civilization anything earlier than the present era. And so it would be impossible for aliens, for example, to be responsible for salting the Earth with its first life 3.8 billion years ago. The universe simply wouldn't allow for the existence of advanced life that early in cosmic history.
You wouldn't be very popular with a lot of science fiction buffs.
Well, I didn't give that a lot of print in this book because we've dealt with that very extensively in an earlier book called Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men.
Yeah.
I actually list that as one of our 8 books that gives pieces of our testable creation model, much more detailed than I can cover in this book. But the 4 we look at in some detail in the book would be the young Earth creationist model, our creation model, biblical creation model that we present here at Reasons to Believe, the theistic evolutionary model, and then the naturalistic evolutionary model. Now, in each case, like naturalistic evolution, theistic evolution, and even young Earth creationism, there's a spectrum of positions within each of those camps. And so what I point out in the book is I pick the one that's got the most prominent or public attention. So, for example, in the young Earth camp, I focus in on the predictions that are flowing out of the Institute for Creation Research and Answers in Genesis, since they are by far and away the most prominent young Earth creationist organizations. Mm-hmm. There are young Earth creationists who take different positions, but I try to pick the most prominent. Same thing with theistic evolution. There's a very wide spectrum of theistic evolutionary positions, but I picked the one that has the most public attention, and same thing within the naturalistic camp. I on purpose picked the Darwinist model as opposed to the models that are being promoted, the non-Darwinian models that are coming out of the Santa Fe Institute. Although in some cases in the prediction table, I will make note that of different positions if their prediction is dramatically different. So I'll actually state what the different positions are underneath that one of those four camps.
Okay, well, talk about the predictions then and the scorecard.
Well, often you will have predictions that, say, 2 or 3 models will agree on.
Okay.
For example, theistic evolutionists, reasons to believe scholars, and atheistic evolutionists all agree that the universe is about 14 billion years old. Right. So we're all making the same prediction on that score. The young Earth creationists are the one that are saying that's 10,000 years or less. So in some cases we all agree, but what I really tried to focus on the table is to try to pick predictions where the 4 different positions actually say 4 different things. Okay. In which case you could actually develop a decent score. And I really was amazed at how many of these predictions that we made back in our book Creationist Science have since been fulfilled, at least to some degree. And I try to do that in the scorecard, where I say partial fulfillment or full fulfillment, because some of these are still a process. For example, the DNA projects on Neanderthal, that's still a work in process. So actually you'll see that the table is partitioned out, where we say, completely falsified, partially falsified, partly affirmed, or completely affirmed. And so you can see how it all works out there. But as you look at the table, you can tell that the young Earth creationists fared the worst, and we have fared the best, and the other 2 positions are somewhere in between. And of course, this is a work in progress. We'll see how this develops as we go on into the future. But I was quite pleased with how well our model has fared in the light of the past year's discoveries.
I'll ask the question again. Would the way you represented these models, would the proponents of these models agree with how you have presented their predictions?
Well, I would expect that young Earth creationists may be fairly disturbed with this table, but what I would point out to them is that in terms of the way we scored them, I wouldn't score them any differently than the atheists would or the theistic evolutionists would. Okay. So in that sense, I feel that the scoring is fair if we get a consensus of the other 2 positions agreeing with us.
Yeah. And again, the goal here is to allow for objectivity, right? This is a way to settle debates so there's no rancor. Is that your goal here?
More than that, if young Earth creationists say, well, we misrepresented them, I say, well, you guys put this in print.